In 2017, Jean-Michel Basquiat's painting, Untitled 1982, was sold at auction for $110 million.
These are the most expensive items in the world!
This piece of work came out of a New York art scene that has been heavily mythologized and sold at great value ever since.
It seems significant that we don't want things to be quiet ever anymore.
Basquiat was greatly aware of the relationship between art, commerce, myth-making, and in his own case, racism too.
And you're seen as some sort of primal expressionism, is that? I mean, like an ape?
In Jennifer Clement's book, Widow Basquiat, she gives us an intimate portrayal of an artist who deeply understood and rejected the institutional art scene and ignorance and prejudice that underlied it. In one snapshot, Clement gives us Basquiat walking around New York's Museum of Modern Art, flicking water on the ground as he passes the canonized works of the almost exclusively white artists on the walls around him. There are no black men in museums, she reports the young artist saying. I'd piss like a dog if I could. Here we see Basquiat's deep rejection of the institutional art scene, a rejection that would lead into his relationship with much of the media and the formation of an image that self-consciously drew attention to the racism which underpinned much of how he was received. In this video, I want to look at Basquiat's relationship with commerce and his image, and think about what that story of distortion and toxic myth-making might tell us about our own creative landscape. I want to think about questions like, when a Basquiat painting is sold for $110 million in 2017, or his work is plastered across t-shirts and hats in highly commercialized modern environments, what story is truly being told and consumed here? What is being lost? And when we mix our own creative work and identity into the maze of online spaces, what deal are we actually getting ourselves into? And how could this relationship come to affect our individualism or the quality of our work?
Beyond our world, there's another world. And it's right here, on my face.
In this piece, I'm going to discuss the importance for modern creatives to focus on real value, depth, and research when they put out work in the content space. To me, this is about retaining the focus on the things that matter and why we got into doing this stuff in the first place, and making sure that when I have a conversation with a friend or perhaps a young person in my family, it's the actual work that I'm talking about and not some metric like view count or revenue. The heart of building a sustainable future for the Creative Minds channel is to grow the paid channels whereby people who are enjoying these videos can support me directly. Over there, I distribute a bunch of extra stuff, including an audio version of all the videos with additional intro discussions around the topics and books that are getting featured. A huge thanks to those who are signed up there already. And with all that said, let's get into the video.
Part 1. Forever's Ammo.
One of the main lies that's told about Basquiat is that he was a graffiti artist. From the writing of Jordana Moore Sagesse on Basquiat's life, we can see that the term graffiti artist in the New York scene at the time was a descriptor that, when discussed within the confines of the formal art and media space, codified ideas of illegality and a quote-unquote primitive approach. Later in this video, I'm going to be talking about how forming a relationship with how our work is consumed can lead to a flattening of who we actually are and what we want to say.
I like to remain a little reclusive, and not be and be out there, to be brought up and to be brought down, like they do to most of them.
But for Basquiat, this image of a wild street kid that had been somehow born out of the walls of the New York subway were less a distortion and more like an outright lie. In his late teens, before he broke out onto the art scene, he had spent a very short amount of time writing on the New York subway walls under the pseudonym Samo. But although something of the energy and style of Basquiat's later work can be seen here, Samo represented a very short period of time, which Basquiat mostly characterises as playing around with friends, and to label his artistic roots as being in graffiti would be a disservice to his lifelong passion for art previously and the deep and formative graffiti scene of New York at the time. When Basquiat did graduate into the art scene, he was very happy to leave Samo behind. But the media and tools of mass consumption weren't built to serve him or how he wished to be portrayed. And the name, or more accurately idea of Samo, with its racially charged lessening of Basquiat as an artist, would follow him in life and death.
Most of my reviews have been more reviews on
your personality.
On my personality, yeah, more so than my work mostly.
How do you react to that sort of thing?
They're just racist, most of these people.
Haiti is, of course, famous for its art.
Yeah, that's why I said genetically, because I've never been there.
Basquiat's mother was born in New York from Puerto Rican parents, and his father was Haitian. As a child, Basquiat showed a passion for creativity that was nurtured deeply, as he was taken to exhibitions and enrolled as a junior member of the Brooklyn Museum of Art. He had a formative experience of being hit by a car and developed an understanding of anatomy and the human figure, which would come out later in his work. By age 11, he could read in 3 languages and was building a deep interest in comic book art. And as he grew up, music would become a big part of his inspiration, citing the experimental, free and expressive side of jazz as one of his major referential points for his own work. And it's in all these elements of Basquiat's story, as well as the understanding of everything in a human's inner life that we don't hear, that we find the basis for actually looking at Basquiat's deep referential paintings and individual perspective. I'd throw up another recommendation for Widow Basquiat here, for any readers who might want to get a closer look at the complex human behind all these words. But in interviews, we see something of the artist's reaction to his new fame, dismissing or shutting down questions, whilst using his image to make conscious comments on the media's simplistic and racist ideas about him. And if he had lived longer, it's very possible that Basquiat would have been able to exert further and further control around his image and story.
Transparent. If I feel comfortable with people or not. It's as if people were one thing, you know, and I don't see it that way.
Part 2: The dangers of bottle feeding in adults.
So the distortion of Basquiat's story took place in the 1980s, when he was consumed by market forces that didn't really have his best interests at heart. But for an artist or creator today who tries to distribute their work in online spaces, the way that their story can be distorted through that relationship with market forces can be far more quiet and hard to define. The difference in 2024's content marketing space is how radically this relationship is now a two-way street. In Basquiat's world, there was something like a clear boundary between his true identity and the third parties that represented its distortion and consumption. For the modern creator who's trying to retain their integrity and boundaries in online spaces, it can be a far more complex task. Many of the creatives in this community have shared experiences and stories about how something in the core value of their work has been lost, and a voice in their head around how it's going to be received in these online spaces has become louder and louder.
The world is full of sounds. Our generation turns it into music, ideas and meaning.
One of the dangers with machine learning is that as listeners start to engage with that catalog, those biases become magnified, and that this creates what's called a kind of feedback loop.
It's a complex game for an artist to play as they weigh up the opportunities that distributing in an online space can offer them, while sitting with the awareness that a lot of what these platforms is doing is taking the wholeness of what we are as a human and categorizing and fragmenting us into metrics that it can harness in known ways. When I was writing this, I had a conversation with a friend where we were talking about how maybe we can conceptualize these online platforms like a kind of toxic romantic relationship, one where we're invited into their house to live for free, The intimacy and promises of future growth is endless, but whenever we actually dig down and ask them if they truly care about us or have our long-term best interests at heart, they pick up a takeaway menu and try to change the subject. Yes, there is another side of this, where these spaces can offer a forum for valuable communication, community building, and playing out the work that we care about. But make no mistake, all the softer layers that sit on top of the cake here are only there to cement a company's market position and serve the bottom line of growth and profit. The book that made me want to explore this subject further was The Amazingly Clear and Energizing Approach to Humanity's Relationship with Technology, You Are Not a Gadget by Jaron Lanier. Inside these pages, Lanier discusses the degeneration and atomization of the individual as they engage with technology and these online spaces. I think you could let this book fall open on any page and meet a kind of clear and resonant idea about the modern state of play here. Being a person is not a formula, but a quest and a mystery and a leap of faith, Lanier tells us. And you have to be somebody before you can start to share yourself. But something like the overall tone or message of this book, which started to provoke my own thoughts around this, was the following. Communication is now often experienced as a superhuman phenomenon that towers above individuals, Lanier writes. A new generation has come of age with a reduced expectation of what a person can be and of who each person might become. This idea of what a person can be made me think about the idols that are often experienced within the online space and what kind of life we're actually being sold if we find some sort of success within those parameters. It's often thrown around that modern children, when asked what they want to be when they grow up, now more commonly say things like influencer or YouTuber than sportsperson or astronaut. And this might seem surprising at first, but I think when you consider it a little bit, it actually makes a lot of sense. I'm not trying to discount the intelligence of children here, only saying that when you look at a lot of the lives that are being sold to us as examples of success in these spaces, they can be seen to represent a kind of childlike paradigm in terms of their behaviour and presentation of reality. Stories about really expensive things maybe, cute animals, or reactions to art that favour exaggerated over-the-top externalisation of emotions. And I'm not trying to throw shade at any of these creators either, only saying that when we look at this, what we're seeing here are really good business people who are sharpening their material to meet the concerns of the market.
When I'm a corporation, appealing to the parts of you that are selfish and self-centered and want to have fun all the time is the best way to sell you things.
And I think there's another slightly deeper level to all of this too, where the promises of remote work and side hustles and content creation make the modern idea of luxury or success often look like sitting inside your house on your own all day whilst you drink iced coffee in branded pajamas.
Welcome. This is Horizon. Think of me as your guide / self-appointed spokes avatar, here to show you around. You know, Horizon isn't about rules or limits or pants or people telling you not to fly an airplane while drinking your fresh ground, fair trade, French press morning coffee through a curly straw. Isn't that right, Debbie? Mm-hmm. And you can even build a world of your own, like laser tag moon landing. Or this islandy place with these cutie patooties.
And I get it. Compared to the kind of complex experience that we might face when we go out and engage with other adults in the real world, this promise of affluence and comfort and protection is an extremely strong one. But when you look back on a life and measure the really truly valuable and impactful experiences, they're probably not going to come from these moments where we're sitting in our own house or inside a bubble of comfort. In short, social media wants to infantilize you. It wants to say there's an easy definition of you in this place, and when real life becomes too hard or complex, You can always come here to regulate those emotions, because this is a space where you'll always feel comfortable. You'll never be actually challenged and face a need to evaluate your behavior or grow and change.
Part 3. See the soup, know the soup, and whatever you do, do not become the soup.
So Basquiat's work was sold in the mass market, but he also had an awareness of the lies and racism that underpinned a lot of that consumption, and had an attitude of rejection according to that. In this piece then, I'm not trying to say that we should give up the value of distributing our work online if we want to, only that we need to build an attitude that allows us to consistently understand the game that we're getting into here. Perhaps the greatest lie that these technological products have been able to sell to the mass public is the sense that this movement towards a more and more overwhelming usage of this technology is something that's inevitable. But if you leave this video with one message taken away here, it's that really it isn't. In 2005, David Foster Wallace gave perhaps the most prescient commencement speech of any writer. A major subject of Wallace's writing and cultural commentary was how the new forms of modern media, in his case television, were pushing out older and harder to engage with things that people previously spent their time on.
Reading requires sitting alone by yourself in a quiet room, and I have friends, intelligent friends, who don't like to read because it's not just bored. There's an almost dread that comes up. I think I don't know that I could defend it, but that seems to me to have something to do with when you feel like the purpose of your life is to gratify yourself and get things for yourself and go all the time. There's this other part of you that's the same part that can kind of is almost hungry for silence and quiet and thinking really hard about the same thing for maybe half an hour instead of 30 seconds, that doesn't get fed at all. And it makes itself felt in the body in a kind of dread in here.
Wallace's speech, This is Water, discusses the idea that we now recognize as something of an attention economy, and how the privilege of being a thinking adult is our ability to always step back and realize that choice that we have about where we spend our time.
There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?" Learning how to think really means learning how to exercise some control over how and what you think. It means being conscious and aware enough to choose what you pay attention to and to choose how you construct meaning from experience. Because if you cannot exercise this kind of choice in adult life, you will be totally hosed.
I wonder, in this age of technology and social media, how the nature of the water in which we all swim is changing. I'm not here to make judgments or decisions for you, but as a closing point, I wanted to put forward a few prompts that might be useful when reflecting on your current relationship with technology and online platforms. Is there a sense that you are now relying and becoming dependent on social media to regulate your emotions and brain chemistry? When you wake up in the morning and reconstitute your mind for the day, what reliance are you placing on social media and online content to form your consistent identity? Are these online spaces serving to promote your lesser or smaller self, defining you by more fragmented and strict definitions, whilst holding back a deeper long-term journey to something that might feel more truthful and complex? How do you actually feel about the consistent intrusion of technology into our lives and possibly our children's lives? And is there some sense of abandon in the way you view it that can be re-evaluated with that awareness of your own choice at the very heart of this? Okay, I'm going to leave that one here. But again, a big arrow to the reading that's constituted this video. and recommendation for people to check out those texts that I've cited. If you want a bit of a longer discussion of this piece and those books, as well as getting everything that I make in an audio version so you can listen to it wherever you want to, then consider coming over and, for the price of a coffee per month, supporting this educational material for everyone who accesses it and getting all that extra stuff directly sent over to you. A massive thanks to all the paid supporters so far, and a thanks to everyone who's watched to the end here. Peace in your work until next time, and yeah, see you soon.